everyone. Welcome to Sprinkle Some Love podcast by Trisha Mullen. Hey everyone, we have Christa Summers with us today. So what I would kind of like to do is talk a little bit about
those things we cope with affect our marriages, our relationships, and how the depression on top of diseases that we're coping with affect our marriages and relationships, because it's kind of like a two-handed thing. You have to cope with your disease, so it's kind of like a set, and they have a ripple effect on whoever your significant other is, of how they cope and how you cope. So let's kind of talk about that. My first question for her would be, as a survivor of cancer, coping is something you obviously know very well. So let's just kind of talk about what were the stages of coping for you, kind of from the beginning. Let's kind of list them in a little bit of stages.
Okay. Stage 1, anger.
That's a good
definite,
stage.
for sure. I don't really know exactly how all the stages went. I just know it was kind of like,
No, it doesn't have to be in order.
yeah,
Just
like
kind of
anger.
the stages
I
you
was
went
like
through in general.
angry, depressed, confident, depressed again, happy, then like change is not always welcome in my life, but I kind of went
Okay.
through it and then worked through that. I don't know what other stages. Grief, change. I don't know.
Yeah,
And
so
then like going through everything, it was kind of, just like hard overall on just like your entire life. So changing your job and your kids' lives and your relationships and everything, that support that you
yeah.
have.
Well, not only is it hard on you, but it's also hard on the person that is your significant other. So when you were coping, was your significant other coping?
Yeah, but with totally different like perspective of coping. Like
The
way
cope.
different things. Because he's looking at it from like a caregiver perspective where he's got to make something work or he's got to like do this, this, and this. And
And you were
I'm
looking for
looking at
help.
it like I either don't want your help even though I need it, or like I need your help and don't want to ask for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
you're
you're
hard-headed.
right.
You're
Yeah,
one.
definitely.
You're toxic. I love it. Okay, so how did for those of you who don't know, Krista is currently divorced. So let's kind of talk about how did you get to that point? What was it with the coping or diseases or depression that played some of a role? Because I know it wasn't all of it. Everyone has their own side effects, but let's not talk about those type of side effects. Let's just talk about specifically how these played a role into getting there. Your diseases and like depression, not anybody's specific action that they did wrong or right.
Right.
You
No,
know.
I think that like going through the divorce was kind of like when I got better and I went into remission, I was like, I have a second chance, and I'm not happy, I'm struggling, I'm not like feeling fulfillment in my marriage. It's just not benefiting me. And even though he did like an awesome deed and he took care of me and like was there for me, I really appreciate that and I love him for it. But like when it comes to having a relationship, you have to have that communication and that support, that friendship. And if it's not there, then why stay? So like that stagnancy, yeah.
Somewhere along the lines, it sounds like he became more of your caregiver than your lover.
Right. And like you forget that you're not the dad or you're not, you don't play that role in the everyday life. So it's like hard to
Mm-hmm.
resort back to like going through like
To
your
being the
normal
lover
like
again.
things. Right.
Yeah.
You know? And then you have that weight on you of like, now I have this new life and I'm supposed to be like doing something great. And if I'm not happy with things, like I should get rid of them, eliminate toxic cells. So like you start with
Yes.
your whole body. Like healing is your whole body, and that's what helps depression is working mind, body, and soul, not just fixing your body or fixing its relationships and everything in general.
Yes, because a
So
relationship brings a lot to the table. When you're in a relationship and you find out you're sick, it doesn't just affect you, it affects your significant other in as many ways as it affects you, but it affects you way more, but it does affect them, especially when you have children, because now they are like the primary provider now for these kids while you're sick, on top of being your primary care provider, that they become so used to fulfilling their providing shoes that they also forget to love thy child, love thy wife, love in general, is something that they are walking and skating through life without enduring or embracing or feeling. And if you don't feel it yourself, you can't give it to others. So when we're sick, we're often looking for love, and our lover isn't giving us those loves that we're looking for because they're so used to being a caregiver. That I kind of want to talk about some topics that people could do in their relationships, maybe some things that you kind of wish you would have implemented because now you see. So with maybe your next marriage or relationship, these will be things you implement in the future because you kind of see what could have been done differently.
Oh man, I think honestly, I pulled out all stops in my marriage. I tried every single thing. Like literally, and I don't say that lightly. Like
No,
I,
not trying
you
to
know,
work on it wise, but what could have been done.
right. I
No
think
matter
that there
how
was
you try to
nothing
work on it at
in,
the end,
right.
it's not the same. It's at the end.
Yeah.
But if you would have done certain things sooner,
I
when
think
would you
it
have
would
implemented
have
those? What was those
been,
flags?
I don't know. I think it would have just been in general, like, if I would have just realized that things were toxic way before a certain point, they wouldn't have
So
got even
toxic.
more toxic. You know, when you start
Toxic is a big
realizing,
flag.
right, and when you can't talk or when you can't share moments or have friends or relationships with other people,
Isolation.
right. So that was probably
Toxic
my first
isolation.
thing. My first thing would have been that sign. And then
Okay.
how I felt, if I would have paid more attention to, my
The inner
mind,
voice.
right, my
Your inner
intuition,
voice.
then I wouldn't have felt so bad and my body might not have gotten so sick because I was, my body had to speak up, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
It's
Your inner
like,
tuition and your body itself are fighting against each other. Your body knows what your body needs, and you're physically denying those requests.
right. And that's what I
Yeah.
was doing because I was like, I have a family, I have this husband, and then, I'm scared of change. And I don't want to lose this. And I've worked so hard for this. So I think that if I would have done all of that sooner, I mean, I can't say I wouldn't have gotten sick. I can't say, like
No,
any
but
of that,
I
but
definitely feel that depression and marriage issues weigh a big issue on anybody who has any form of disease because anytime you're carrying those weight or those burdens on your back on top of your daily have tos like being a mom, going to treatment, eating, just doing your daily stuff, it makes it very hard. And those are the things that make it toxic, that weight. So the more weight that you carry that's negative weight is what makes us sicker. So I've noticed over the years, you and I have picked up so much positive weight, and I think that's been something that's helped us out of being sick, is having something to look forward to, having those things to do to give back to the community, finding those people that need help for Christmas or whatever it is we're currently doing, because we're always into something. And
right,
I
for
feel like
sure.
that's kind of our go-to. Our go-to
Yeah.
is to
I feel like
find
I
something
had to do
positive.
that. Like I had to replace that energy with a new energy and like a new goal, like a new atmosphere,
Yes.
just like a total different change.
So a
So,
new vibe.
yeah, and once I started doing that, it was just easy for me to get rid of things that didn't benefit me, overall in life anymore. So I was like feeling better and
Yes.
happier. Like my
Once you pick
depression
up that
just, yeah.
positiveness and that positive energy, it's so hard to let go. It's kind of
Right. Like the power of
it can be an
positivity,
addiction.
yeah, it's a serious thing. And that's what happened. Like I just stemmed from one thing and like, left and right, I'm throwing out boundaries and I'm throwing out this and that, like, and it was good and healthy. And so I
So setting
think
boundaries. Let's talk about that for a minute. I
for
really like
sure.
that you said that because boundaries was going to be kind of my next topic. Because once you develop this sense of achievement, you have to put up those boundaries. So what boundaries did you find yourself having to throw up in order to successfully make these changes?
Just making sure that I remembered, I matter. And if I'm not happy, then don't do it. And, prioritize what it is that I want in life. And if things don't line up for that, sometimes you leave things behind. And I can't always, sometimes holding on is harder than letting go, I guess.
Yes.
So,
You nailed it, actually.
yeah.
It's probably taken you a long time to realize that as well, because that is something that it can take people years to realize.
Yep.
And often people don't let go of certain things out of the fear of what will be. The same
Yep.
reason why they don't start certain projects out of the same fear of what could be or what won't be. The fear. Fear
Yep.
is kind of want to be my next topic. When did you overcome that fear? How did you do it? Like, what techniques did you use, girl? Share that.
Well, and that's the thing because I went through cancer and then that scared me enough that if I don't change my life, I'm not going to, like, life is short. Like, I'm not going to have all this time. I don't want to keep living how I've been living. So, having something like that just kind of like triggered this in me where I didn't want to do it anymore, and not just my marriage, but multiple things. So, it was
So
kind of like that fear.
fear
Yeah.
and being drained because
Right, and
fear
not
can
living the
drain
life that
you.
you should have lived or wanted. Like don't like no not chasing your goals or not having those friendships that you've had your whole life and you've been isolating yourself from. Reconnections, all those
Okay.
things.
you just hit another good bell that was actually on my list of talks about. So, as we say, isolating. So, for many years, I was sick as a child, and I would go to school and like not talk about it and not tell people, or I'd be feeling really sick and like lightheadedness, and I would suffer alone. Like people in the
Yeah.
office knew what was going on with me, so I could always go down there and sit in like the principal's office when I was in elementary and take a few minutes, to gather myself or to check my blood pressure or whatever. But like I hid it, and I found myself coping alone and dealing with this alone out of the fear of what other people would think or say or how they would treat you, because people start to treat you different when they find out what's going on with you. So how did that work for you? How did people treating you different change you for the good, maybe, and the bad?
I think that, like, when I was diagnosed, I had so many people reach out to me that I wasn't friends with, or people that I went to church with, or this or that. And I had to distinguish the difference between somebody being nosy and somebody caring. And that is something I've carried over since then, is, not to prioritize people that are just there, not to prioritize the people that don't care, and like the ones that just want to know your business or spread the word,
How were you able to start telling people what was going on with you? What made you
I just, everybody had been asking me this, that, and the other thing, so I kind of posted it on Facebook and started sharing. And
Facebook was how
yeah,
you chose to inform everybody.
right. And also then after that, I just continued to like talk about things so that I felt like I had support and realized who was there and not. And then once I started eliminating, people that weren't, supportive, or people that weren't positive.
Those knots.
Right.
Life started getting better to the positive.
Yeah, because I had more room for positive things to come back into my life by getting rid of all those negatives, and I noticed it was easier for me just to say, oh, this person is, not, like, even if I've known you since whenever, like, if you're not doing good things with your life, or you're not like sharing, right, I grew.
In order for me to be able to move forward with you, because
Right.
there's just some stages in my life I'm not willing to go back to.
Right.
And
I'm not the
sometimes
person
you're
I was. Yeah.
sometimes you're still stuck in that zone of the I don't want to go back to that. So if I affiliate myself with you, then I might find myself sucked back into that lifestyle that I'm not trying to be involved in, no matter what that is, whether it's drama, whether it's fights, whether it's their unhealthy relationship that they're having that makes it really hard for you to maintain that love and friendship you have because they're a significant other. And we often find ourselves dealing with our friends' problems. So how were you
Yep.
able to knock all of the friends off of your back with all of their problems? Because I know that you and I attract people that we love to help, and that we are surrounded ourselves with people that we help, but who helps us. So how did you knock those I don't want to say leeches, but that's kind of the definition here. But
Right, and in a way they kind of do, because they latch onto you and they become reliant upon your friendship. And I have a lot of friends like that, and I love them all. But it's like sometimes there's just times of life where you have to go through things. Yeah, you're the priority. And so I just had to let them know, I'm sorry, I don't have time for you right now, all right? And once it became something that I could just say so easily, I began saying it wherever I needed to. Like, no, right now isn't good for me.
So easily, did you find yourself losing friends that?
Yeah, and I let them go. I let them go.
Bad apples, as I call them.
Yep, because some of those people were only in it for rides or for the benefits or to have a place to crash their head if they needed, whatever. And it's like, you can't, as an adult, be doing those things anyways. We're not in high school. We're not, we're grown-ups.
So why? This real quick. So you basically went through, for you to be able to process everything that happened, you went through these changes. You went through explaining to your husband, your family. You went through, knocking off those friends that weren't there for helping you. These were how you were coping with them and dealing with things. But once you got surrounded by loving people, how were you able to positively turn this negative situation into a positive? Because you couldn't turn it into a positive with all those negative things around you. Once you got to that point that you realized, you're like, Usa, what did you then realize? I have to figure out a next step. And what was that next step? Like, what did you do next after you detoxed all that negativeness?
Well, after I started building, like just regrowing.
What did you build?
I built my life, everything, like full circle. I reconnected with friends. I got my own place. I started decorating how I wanted to, and I started taking time to do things with my kids and to involve myself in activities that they had for school. We started.
because you thought you were dying, or these were things you
No,
were
this
gonna
was like my
do?
reborn. Like, you know, like
No, reborn, born
right.
again.
Right. So I just was like, I'm starting over. I'm doing everything how I want and I'm going to do it the right way. And I brought in only good people and I started going back to church and I found a new church because I didn't want to go to the same church I was even going to. Like, you know, I reassessed
I
my
would always do
religion.
that. I church hopped for many years, and I often found myself at churches where I felt comfortable, but then I soon realized I wasn't comfortable, and I found myself not religious hopping, but just finding a church that I could feel like was my home. So what about that other church? Because I people don't often talk about that, but we
Um,
go to churches and we say we're not happy, but no one talks about that not happiness of that religion. Because we all seek religion in some form when we're sick. Whoever your God may be, people tend to turn to that. So what was it
well,
that made you turn away from that church, but still realize I still need a church? So I found this
I
church.
think
What
it wasn't necessarily that I returned to church for me because I feel like my faith was stronger than ever at that point. My faith in God and like life was stronger than ever without church being a factor. But because I had kids, I wanted to like plant that seed in them. And that way there was something there for me to water. Like along with all of the growth I was going through, I wanted to bring them in on it. So I
So did
found
they do
something.
something wonderful? How are your children doing now in church, and are they
Well,
successful
with
in that
COVID, we
church?
haven't been going back to this church in a little bit, but we're going to start going back soon. But like the first time I took Maddie to this church, she walked up to the altar and here she is, barely 2 years old, and kneeled in front of the altar with her hands like cupped like she's praying and put her head down in front of everybody at the church, right in front of the
They loved
pastor.
you from the moment you
And
came.
she just sat there the whole time with her big eyes staring at, him
And
talk.
waited.
Right.
Aww.
And I was like, this is great because in the Catholic Church, that never would have happened, you know?
No, they would have kind of looked at
They would
you
have
like,
escorted us right on out.
oh, you felt really at home with this church.
Right.
You're
And so we
at home
resonated there.
with children in the church. So making sure you're comfortable with your church, and if you're not, would you advise other people to go and find a church that they are? Because what if you would have never changed churches? How would you think that would have
Right.
worked?
And I think that that was just a part of my growth. So I feel like you have to find what it is that your faith falls in. But having faith is, faith is bigger than fear. So always have faith. Choose faith. Find whatever it is that you have that.
That month of your fear, maybe, is what you're kind of
Yeah, I think that
finding.
not just my religious faith, but my spiritual and like my faith in myself, like my inner faith, just having a better overall like faith outlook in life and the universe began to give me more like in return. And it kind of got me through that hump and that depression and realizing that just holding on to my faith, like everything's going to be okay. So it got me realizing where I
So
needed
once
to
you
work
kind
on
of
what.
got to that point, where would you say, once you got to that point where you were, healthy, you detoxed from all these people, what made you realize that your husband was still part of, once you did all of that and you were over cancer, what made you realize there was even a problem with you or your husband that was more needed addressed, like a possible issue
I've
for a
talked to him.
divorce?
I've talked to him about this actually. And it's like at some point we stopped growing together and started growing separately. And it wasn't necessarily one thing happened or this or this. It was the way we handled things in general. Like as
Everything
adults,
stacked up.
right. And we handled this differently, which built this wall, which did this. And he's not a bad person and I'm not a bad person, but together our struggles, we ended as different people. We aren't the same. You go through so many stages of life and we couldn't stay in love through all those stages. And then having gone through something such an impact on your life and being so young right after a pregnancy and a loss and all these
Yes.
things, it
The
was
trauma that you went
right.
through, the amount of trauma that is
Right.
all
And people
classified.
people go through, a lot of things in their life that they just can't make it through. And now we're friends and we're on good terms and we have a decent coexisting like lifestyle.
Yes.
But
I
it's
have
like
that with my daughter's father. It took us
right.
many years to get there if you would have
Us
only really
too,
known the
you
details
know?
of the past with the public.
Right. And
And for
it's
those of you who
it's
are listening who knows that takes, who knows the past with my daughter's father, it's taken us many years to get to have a friendship and to be able to communicate and just to be able to have conversations about the daily stuff with my
and
daughter.
that is where
And
boundaries came back into play because like I had to make sure to not cross those lines of reincorporating him into my life in a way I didn't want him,
you're always going to be setting boundaries.
Right.
'Cause
So
as you
those
went
were
through that divorce,
important.
there's boundaries. As you go through this friendship phase, there's boundaries. And
And
then
I wish
as
I
your
would have
children
had those
grow,
boundaries in my marriage before that to know where I was, kind of lacking. But
hmm
now it's like those boundaries are important. So remembering to like just place boundaries in your life for people that you bring in an emotional like level, because that's going to look out for your soul.
yes. So part of those boundaries were like, kind of with your health part, what did you place those boundaries with your health? I know that we've gone through our trials and tribulations with different doctors where you and I have both found ourselves at moments where we're firing doctors and then hunting
Yeah.
for another doctor. And I don't
I
think people
think,
realize that you can even fire a doctor. So I
right.
kind of want to talk about that for 2 seconds before you answer that
Okay.
question. Just because a doctor works for you, for those of you who don't know. When you make an appointment to their office, it's the same way as you make an appointment to a dentist or anywhere else. If you go in there and you're not liking the service you get, you can choose not to come back, which means you fired them. And if you don't want them at the hospital while working on you for whatever visit you're currently admitted for, you can fire him and request a new doctor be given, or he or she, whatever doctor or sex the doctor is. But having that ability to knowledge to know that, it took Christa and I some time to realize we can say we're not doing this. We can say no, and we can say we want a different doctor and fire you. So what incident happened for you that made you realize, I'm firing you, and I'm firing you today?
I've had a lot of doctors that just, they didn't do the right things, they didn't do this or that. You know, there was times where I had like just not agreeance upon the things that they wanted to do, and not just
What
when
was
it
the
comes.
biggest topic or issue that you didn't agree upon? I really want people to understand
I
that because there's
think
other people out there just
people
like you.
people think that or doctors think that because they, say this that everyone's supposed to do that, but there's multiple differences in everybody's body, so you shouldn't have the same prescriptions, you shouldn't have the same treatment plans. Like everything has different factors, and
The
so
order of
sometimes,
operation.
right, so like everyone should have individualized treatment plans, and like all of these things, one person might do this, well the other person might try that and it won't work. So it's like doctors believe in science and the proof of what works, but that doesn't revolve around the statistics of the things that are constantly changing. And that's one of the biggest things in life is change is constant.
You
So,
know what I realized it was for you and I? I realized that ain't nobody in that book from your clinical trial errors, or whatever you want to call them, that the FDA made you do to be able to approve this medication. I am not allowed to participate in those. And people with multiple diseases like myself, who are the people that are actually taking this medication on a daily, are not allowed to participate. You cannot show me one person that participated in a clinical error or trial error or whatever you call those things for a medication to be, publicly sold that has one of my diseases. Because if you did, you would be able to tell me how it affects my diseases. I feel as if we were guinea pigs at times because I haven't met another person other than you who even has as many similar diseases that can even say that their list looks like my list.
agreed.
So to say that somebody with the similar list of diseases as like me, myself, has taken these medications and their hearts and their organs and their body was just fine and everything was perfect and worked and went back to normal. Again, what is normal? And what in your little book for normal, you're going based off your normal from a normal, healthy person who tested this medication for that one disease and had that one disease. So yeah, 50 people that just had that one disease or just endometriosis might have, but
I just
I
think that
have
there's not enough awareness about how
multiple
much pressure that
diseases.
you can put back on the doctors and how much you can ask for or how much you don't need to
Being
rely
able to
on
advocate for
what.
yourself,
Right, and you don't
yes.
have to rely on exactly what they say. Get second opinions, think outside the box, try alternative healing, try other
The
things.
box is
you
made
know
for someone who only has that one
you
disease. That is what
create
that
that
box
box,
is.
you create your own box, so
I'm
you
my
you
own
know
box. I am,
like,
and I have a whole list of my
right,
own
and so
problems that ain't
everybody
nobody
is
else
different.
got.
Everyone's different, and it's like they don't
Yes.
account for all the differences. And when they're
No,
medicating and they're giving you all these things, like I'm supposed to be on 21 medications a day and
they're
I
not
take
mixing,
none.
right?
And it's like, right, you're
I got a
mixing all these
question. Did you
things.
have an app? So back in the day, I remember my brother was in school on my mother's side to be in the Navy, and he was learning how to be a medic at the time. And he had this MedRight app, is what it was called, if I'm correct. And I would download it, and like nurses and interns and doctors would use this app. And what you do is you upload every medication that you have in it. And at this time, I was feeling like all of these medications that were being mixed shouldn't be being mixed. And while my brother was home from, I want to say he was visiting from Virginia at that particular moment, when he was coming in from his travels. We were discussing this, and he's like, oh, well, there's an app for that. I'm like, what do you mean there's an app for that? So when you put the stuff in, it tells you do not mix, don't mix, what to give, what
Right.
to don't. So the doctor kind of has like a medical book reference, and it's the palm of his hand. Well, I had been arguing with these different doctors at that time about mixing medications, and I was able to see it clearly says don't mix. So I went back to my doctor with all of that information, and I realized at that point he don't know what he's doing. And I had this medications, there was 3 different medications from 3 different doctors, but I let each one know.
Right, and their specialty is of what they're there for, you know? And so it's like even putting together all these medicines, like an internal medicine specialist is probably best, but even so, like you can do so many different replacements with alternative things versus medicine from pharmaceutical companies that are ran by, you know, the CDC and the FDA and like the doctors that are giving them to us.
Yes,
And it's
there are
like,
times that they
you
save
know,
your life, and there are times
there are
that they don't,
times
but then
when
there are
you should
times that
rely on them,
be.
and then there's times when you can incorporate how your body feels and trust your instincts, and maybe you don't need whatever it is, or maybe if
Yes.
something's mixing with this and it doesn't sit
Or a
well,
percentage, but
right, you know, if
there's no
something
way that
doesn't,
we need 20 pills a day or 40
if something
pills a
doesn't
day.
sit well together, trust your instincts and bring it up to your doctor. Don't just continue on it. Don't just keep saying, oh, he said I need to do this. Fight for yourself and your health and your body and how it feels.
Okay, I definitely agree for that. Self-advocating was something it took me many years to realize that I could do, and if it wasn't for me developing that confidence, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, and I probably would have even had more surgeries than what I've even had today.
Me too.
Because I was able to advocate for myself, and I was
Yep.
able to say these things or request this or do that.
And I was
So,
after, you know, it took 4 years for them to find my cancer. And it's like I was sick this whole time coming to you, begging, you know, telling all these doctors this and being sent here and there and test and test. And it's like I told them that there was something wrong. And, you know, okay. So some of the things that worked and some of the things that didn't. Right? Like pretty much some, like in general. All right. So this holistic lady, it's like she was actually from my hometown and I never knew her. I didn't know her like family or any of that, but like her name like had circulated and somebody was like, "Oh, go see Bonnie," you know, blah blah. So I went and saw this woman and she pretty much was like, "Oh, well, all of your like treatment here will be sponsored and like blah blah blah," you know, pretty much giving me like an open door for all of the things that she had in her practice. And she had been like an RN for like 17 years or so. And then she was like, I just, you know, resonated so much more with this. And I just started, you know, build it and they will come type thing. And she did it.
For those of you who don't know, what is a holistic nurse? What does her shop consist of? Like, what does that mean?
It's pretty much like alternative medicines and things like tinctures or essential oils, supplements. They have like crystals and like foot detox ion and like ionizers, you know, like pH level balancing.
So which one of those things did you find yourself utilizing to help you through these battles? What was
all
it
of
that
them.
you chose?
I use all of them. But
did you
now,
use them all at one time or in different
no.
phases? And how did you learn those things?
Definitely over time, I started going and like seeing her and like seeing what worked for me. And I started using like the foot ionic spa thing for like that
Yes, I wanted
draws.
to bring that up.
That draws toxins out of your lymphatic system, like your organs. Like it removes impurities that like can
Yes,
clog your
I
system up.
recall this specific day with you. You had called me and you had told me how fabulous treatment was this particular day with her, and you had told me about the foot tub and how I had to do it. And I was so invested in doing that with you. We went and got like a double tub to where we could come and do it, but then our house kind of took a turn to where we never actually had the time to sit down and actually use that tub together. Even still to this day, it's been a goal. I always wanted to do that foot tub thing. It's kind of like on my to-do list. So what I really want to do is in the future, for those of you who are interested in learning more about that particular detox, maybe even me and you doing like a live video or something that I upload on one of our platforms.
Yeah, that would be great.
Talk about that more. I really
because there's a lot that goes into it, right?
And you had called me that day and you had told me the color of the water or the color of whatever comes out was like a brownish color, and your kidneys later and your levels over time were able to go up, and you were able to start getting some good self-management in right after that, I recall.
Well, and like honestly, it was kind of like it's like what kicked off the beginning of my body like starting to function at a normal pace with like drawing out all the things from chemo and radiation, all those like toxins that were like put into my body from all those chemicals, and my body was just like lagging. And then at that point it was like, do this detox and kind of like restart. And then I started like alkalinity and like making sure that my pH levels were at a certain point. And like I replaced all these medicines with like tinctures, which are pretty much made up of, some type of plant and usually alcohol or brandy or something. And they like they're not like, they're not like medicine. They don't replace
No,
all
I
of your
fully believe in
medicines,
those, and I
but
really like
it
the
helped
idea.
me, it helped. And then after like following my pH levels and like my alkalinity and like making sure I was detoxifying, it just kind of started like bringing everything up, kind
Yeah,
of.
so after you got up, how did you continue to move forward? Do you still incorporate any of that into your daily living today, now that you're no longer like, you're still battling, but you're not in that same shoes you were then? Like, do you still find yourself needing those things or using them to the daily to keep yourself ahead of the game to where you are now?
I only try to drink like pH level water. I do a lot of alkalinity things still every day. Like I try not to let my pH level fall below a point that it needs to be at. When it comes to like the tinctures, only if I'm feeling certain things, or like if, I don't really do them every day. The foot spa, like you're not supposed to overuse that. So like people who keep their levels at a certain point, I would suggest using that maybe once every couple weeks.
Yeah, so
You
I'm
know.
definitely interested in getting into that in the future. So, what else though didn't work for you though? I know that I remember there was a time that called me, but I don't remember what you did, but you did feel like you wanted to go back for a little while. So it was something that threw you off. And sometimes it works for people and sometimes it doesn't. So what was it that threw you off at that time?
To be honest, I think it was like once you start getting into like mind, body, spirit all together, if you're not super spiritual and you haven't had a lot of interactions with like facing your emotions, and then you go and you do all these readings and you learn about all these traumas that you've, kind of like suppressed, then
Okay.
those things kind of surface. And when we started like facing those traumas and like working on my mind part of my body, I really don't deal with emotions well. So I was like, let's reel it back in. Let's take a little break from, because it's kind of like wrapping
Yeah.
your head around things like the right way, not
You
letting it
weren't fully
affect
coping
you.
yet. Your coping
Right.
mechanisms weren't quite there the way that they are now.
Right. So bringing like myself back in after a couple months, like I was able to like address what it was I learned, or, just kind of like keeping things like emotionally stable and finding my balance and my
Okay.
grounding. And that was
So
where it kind of got weird.
once it got weird, what made you realize that whatever she was doing was something I still wanted to take part in? Because you obviously went back. So what made you decide to go back? What moment did you hit that you were like, I could probably use a little bit of her services?
I think that there was just like a point of chaos where I kind of just needed a little bit of a break. And then one day I was like, I'm just not feeling great. And I haven't really been addressing things that, I'm kind of losing that, like, go.
That momentum.
Right. And
So
so,
you feel like she gave you energy or more
no, I
momentum
feel
or
like once I kind of stopped going and like could reassess my thoughts, that I, realized I kind of need to stay going. I need to like keep this,
so when
positivity and
you
stuff. So then I went back just so I could address the things that we had, stopped at. And it was kind of just facing the traumas, or realizing, doors were closing or closed, and, just working through it and coping with the depression and the feelings and like the things I kind of kept submerged.
So was there a point, like when you went back, that you and her had to have a conversation on what you were comfortable with or what services you weren't comfortable with? And if there was, how
I
did you
don't
handle
think
that?
that any of the services that she offered I was ever uncomfortable with. I think it was the reaction that I had to, like when you do
Or maybe
Reiki.
you weren't ready for it.
Right. Like,
Maybe the
well, when
better
you do
words of
Reiki
choice
and
here.
things, she says it's like an emotional time. And so when you do this process, you're like releasing all these traumas. So most people are okay with that, and they're okay with, crying or feeling whatever. And like I'm not into that.
No,
So
you're not.
right, like I'm not a big
You're
fan.
for those of you who don't know Krista very well, I want to say this for a moment. She's a very private person, so when she does share, it's very hard for her to share. And the fact that she's So sharing and open now is completely different than like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, Krista.
Right, like
She's a completely
exposure is not
different
my
person.
thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, and being able to have these conversations publicly with her is probably something I've never even thought possible. So, like, I'm very proud of you. I just want to
Oh,
say that
thank you.
you're definitely you've given me my moments where I want to be like, oh, she's an inspiration to me.
Aw, I love
As my
you.
little sister, she feels like a big sister today.
That's cute.
Yeah.
But I think
So
that it's just, yeah, it's all about just trying to get in touch with all the parts of you, you know, and
yes, mind, body, and spirit,
understanding
which is
them.
kind of what I'm trying to get everyone to see with the whole sprinkle some love. You have to sprinkle love in yourself and around you and within your diseases, and they kind of tie all three. And within yourself lies most depression whenever the self-mending is intended to. Like, if you don't tend to yourself, depression will grow because you're not tending to your own garden and your own self and your soul. And once you start doing that, it takes a lot of de-weeding and levels of de-shedding these things that we held on to for so many years. And now, like, once they're gone, what do we do with our life? Almost like the born again scenario that you have. It's similar to that, but instead of born again, it's like, what do we do now? So once you got through with your treatments with her, did you find yourself feeling that way in life again as well at that time? And if you did, what did you do? Like, what did you do after treatment with this newfound feeling of healthiness and, like, I can do this?
I feel like I really, like, that's not really what gave me the motivation to, like, stay on top of everything. It just aided in my mindset throughout it. And then once I figured out how to control, my mind and how to get things to where I could regulate medicines or I could alleviate pain this way or I could remove toxins this way, like this helps you sleep, just kind of understanding my body and understanding my moods and the things that would benefit, progress in general without kind of like bringing me back, into like a funk or without bringing me into, needing to take all these medications. So, like, once I figured out how to balance everything, it just became, like, a way of life. Like, it wasn't, something that, like, I just always wanted to continue it on. So I would still drink the water. Or I would still do, I just continued
So you
doing it.
haven't actually stopped any of those traditions that you learned and picked up. You've continued.
Yeah, so far.
So far, that's very good. I like that because that shows positive reinforcement that it was something that you identified with the fact that you really needed it and that you're not willing to let it go, which means it's truly helped you because we only tend to gravitate towards the things that make us feel good and make us feel like, this is what's for us. So
Right.
I like that. Okay, well, my next question would kind of go back to if you could leave this, podcast helping somebody, what would you tell them through all of these trials, tribulations, the marriage, the relationships, the depression? How did you keep it together, and what would you recommend they do to keep it together so they could go forth and continue their next journey like you have?
I think you just have to figure out, what you need to do to cope with everything. Like, how do you read people and how do you handle situations and how do you work through struggles and continue to realize that everybody's going through something different. Even if you're sharing the same life and the same perspective, you cope differently and your perspective is entirely different. So you have to remember that everyone has a different love language and, don't give up on the person that you love and don't give in to things that, are kind of in the way of your growth, and just keep every day reminding yourself that you matter and that you are important and that all the things you're doing are for the benefit of you and your life, So you just got to keep going and live every day like you're, not sick and not depressed and stagnant, because then you're just going to stay there.
Alrighty. I definitely feel that. If you don't start somewhere, it will never happen. So
Right.
getting up and starting to do these small things every day will, and not being, not acting as if you're depressed will slowly getting you back into the game of life will start making you feel like things are normal again.
Right, and I'm not saying like don't talk about it, because definitely reach out, have support. And like that's the thing, people get weird when it comes to depression. They think, oh, I can't share this, or I don't want to be a burden, or I'm not, nobody wants to hear this. But there are people that they do want to hear it, and they're going through the same things, and they're not necessarily just going to shrug you off. And sometimes there's people that you think might want to hear it and they don't, but that's okay. Like, let them do what they need to do and find someone else to talk to. Like, don't let that bring you down even more. Just keep, reach out, find support, and don't, hesitate to just continually feel like you need to look for that person that's going to help you get through it, because who cares? Like, someone will come along, something will change. Like, things are not ever permanent.
Definitely. I really appreciate everything that you've brought into the table today and all of the valid points that you brought out and sharing your life with us and some of this personal moments with us. I appreciate. So where can people find you? And let's tell them a little bit about where, what you do with the public. So if they're looking to hear more about you or learn more, they can.
Okay. Well, I have a podcast too. It's called Advice from a Sunflower. You can find that pretty much anywhere. Spotify, Pandora, Apple, everywhere. Wherever you want. Google.
Yes.
And then like Canvas for the Cause, which Trisha works for that as well with me. That's our family organization. That's like a resource and a platform for just like peer support and like people going through cancer. And you can find that on Facebook or canvasforthecause.org. So
yes, and this Christmas we recently opened, the past Christmas, the list of people who did not have cancer. So we were able to help families that did not have cancer this past year because of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure what's in store for this year. I guess people have to wait and see, but I definitely can't wait.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Me
So
neither.
check that out if you haven't already. Go over there, like it, check it out. Feel free to message us over there if you have any questions about the organization or if you're interested in an application, because we do benefits as well. So if you're a cancer person and you are struggling and you're not sure how to financially pay for everything, reach out to us and maybe there is something we can do or a benefit we could throw together to try to help gather donations for you, or even a fundraiser we could throw where we could sell items on the behalf and donations go to you and your cause of whatever it is we're trying to knock out, like a bill or whatever. So yeah. What about your Facebook page? Can people reach you there, Christa?
Yeah, totally. You can definitely try. But I may or may not see the spam, but definitely you can.
Okay, definitely. So thank you for joining us, and tune in next time for some more Sprinkle for Some Love by Trisha Mullen. And
Thanks for having me.
Yep, that's all.
All right, have a good night, guys.
Bye-bye.